right, hey, welcome back to Painting for Absolute Beginners. I'm Rod Bergeron, and we're going to have a look at mixing some colors today and looking at more working on our still life. So I want you to get your paints and your brushes and your water and grab yourself a tissue, just a regular tissue. One of the tips or tricks I'd love you to pick up is that you really need to have a tissue with you when you're watercolor painting all the time. It really will save you a lot of work and a lot of headaches and a lot of tears, really. Watercolor paint and water are really easy to pick up off the page fairly quickly, fairly easily, and not leave any permanent marks on the page if you do it quickly, but you need to have a tissue with you readily on hand to do that. Today, we're just working with a number 5 round brush, which is probably a pretty standard brush most people have. I would say I use this brush probably about 50% of the time at least. All right, so again, remember, this is painting for absolute beginners, so I want you to have some fun with it. All right, you see me at the beginning, I got out the hair dryer, I was drying off where my banana, where I painted in my banana from the previous video. That's a pretty common thing for me. I use a hair dryer all the time, get in there and dry it up really quickly. It allows you to move on to the next step. All right, so we have a banana on here. I want to talk about some real basic, just getting yourself some color on the brush, all right? So the way that I generally do it, very often you'll see I work wet on wet. That means my page is wet, all right? I wet my page with my brush. And I'm just wetting this top part of the banana here. I'm not wetting the whole thing. I'm just going to wet the top part here. All right, so I usually work with my brush fairly wet. I should say I work with a fairly wet brush and a fairly wet page most of the time. So what I want you to do, I wouldn't suggest to you that you put your palette on your page. I'm just doing it as a demonstration. I want you to put the brush full of water, maybe a couple of times full of water, into the yellow and give it a little swirl around, all right? And just pick up a whole bunch of yellow. So the more you swirl this around, the more pigment you're gonna pick up and put into that water, all right? So at some point, you're going to know, and this takes a little bit of practice, you're gonna know how many times you're gonna swirl this around with how much water to pick up the pigment that you want. Now this is gonna have a lot of pigment in it, all right? I'm gonna put this into the place that I painted the wet line, and I'm just going to leave that just like that. And maybe there's another little line across the bottom here that has some yellow in it. All right, I'm just gonna leave it just like that and allow that to dry. So the next piece of fruit that I'm gonna put on here is I'm gonna put an apple on here, all right? But I'm gonna use this same yellow again. So I'm going to use the basis of my apple is going to be yellow. So I'm just going to use the yellow paint and start to paint an apple shape. Maybe my apple goes a little bit behind my banana here. Put a little bit of an apple shape and paint the line sort of curved. Don't go, side to side. It's an apple. Leave a little space between your banana and your apple here, or maybe paint your apple in a completely different area. Again, I'm just practicing. I'm trying to keep this in the center of the page so that it turns out all right for filming. Now, I have quite a bit of, so that was wet paint on a dry page. So that is wet on dry, all right? So I want you now to, again, pick up a bunch of red paint, swirl it around, just a little bit though. Don't make it quite as concentrated as you made the yellow. Pick up a good amount of it on the brush. And you'll see, I didn't paint everything in here yellow. I left some areas that were white. Right now I'm just going to put this red paint onto that yellow in a couple of different spots. Maybe put a little bit on the area that I had white. And you'll see, I'm dapping the paint on. I'm not putting it on and putting along a long brush stroke like I did for the banana. I'm just putting in a couple of drops here and there. I'm going to let that just blend together. Now, if you have a hair dryer, or you have, maybe you're at school or work or someplace and you have a hand dryer in the washroom, you can get that and use that to dry this up a little bit. So I'm going to just turn on my hair dryer, dry this up a little bit, and then we'll have a look at it. It doesn't have to be completely dry, all right? So just go and have a real quick dry of this. All right, so I let my hair dryer run on there for probably a good 5 minutes, but it's completely dry. And the page is actually pretty warm right now. Okay, so I want you to grab some water up again. And I'm gonna point out a couple of things here too. The color of the banana is very close to the color that I currently have on here for the apple. So you can't really see where banana ends and apple starts. But we're gonna make this into a red apple, all right? So don't get too worried about that right now. Consider this as an underpainting. So this is the beginning of our watercolor painting. This is going to stay fairly consistent with the color that it is right now, all right? So I want you to paint sort of a semicircle around the front of this apple. And then just with the width of your brush, sort of fill in some of this area. Doesn't have to be all of it. And then we're going to just grab, you have to look at it from the side to see where you have it wet. Grab up some red paint, and I'm just gonna mix up some red, get a lot of red on the brush here, and put that into this. And again, I'm just tapping the wet brush onto here. And you'll see we're going to fill in this apple shape. All right, we're just going to let that do its thing there. All right, don't worry about where it's red or too red in one area, not enough red in another. Just leave it for now. And we're going to take our brush again. We have a little bit of brown paint here, and I'm going to just put a little bit of a stem in here to start with. Right? Doesn't have to be a lot. I'm going to pick up this brown again, and I'm going to go back at my banana a little bit. So this is wet on dry. The page is dry, but the paint is wet. All right? And that's that. And we're going to leave this dry, and we'll come back and see what happens to it. But I think I'm going to also take my orange, and I'm going to make my orange a little bit rounder here. Pick up a little bit more orange paint, and again I'll show you. I'm just putting paint into the orange. Give it a quick little swirl. Pick up a little bit of orange. Put it on here, and again just dap it. Okay, we're not trying to put on large strokes of paint. We're just trying to touch the page a little bit and get a little bit of paint going on there. All right, this one's turning out not too bad. So I hope you picked up a tip or a trick here. I guess the main thing that I want you to focus on is having fun. I want you to think about just putting a little bit of color on the page at a time. We're going to get into more advanced color theory certainly as we move on through this course. But I want you to think about just putting a little bit of paint on at a time, keeping it very controlled, not worrying about rushing through it, all right? Again, and not a whole bunch of long, this isn't about putting on brush strokes. Get the area wet that you want to have the pigment in, pick up some pigment, put it onto your page in the wet area, and it will stay right there. Just have fun with it. I hope you picked up a tip or a trick, and if you did, please click liked. If you liked this video, please click liked. If you have a question or a comment, please leave it in the comment section for me. I'd love to hear from you. And if you don't currently subscribe to my channel, please consider subscribing to my channel. I really do appreciate everybody that clicks like or leaves me a comment, and certainly everybody that subscribes. So thanks again. I'll see you next time.